Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 8 of the Wayfarer podcast. My name is Jared, and I'm here with
Jonathan,
Zach,
Katya,
Riley.
We didn't forget about you, buddy.
Thanks, Jared.
It is so good to be back around the table, everybody. So glad that we get to be here and chit chat. The last episode we were on, we had a little Q&A, a little live podcast event. What'd you guys think about that?
I liked it. It was fun. I think we're asking the right questions and, more importantly, asking the right people. I think there's a lot to learn from people like Zach and Mike. More of that.
Yeah, I thought Mike was awesome. I thought having somebody with his insight and his perspective, and specifically the work he does, he gets to do a lot of that every week, I feel like, and get to be asked a lot of questions. And I think it was cool getting to have that conversation on the podcast, and even in the live setting, like with just an audience, it was cool, like being interact with them a little bit, hear them laugh. I thought that was a fun mechanic to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of the feedback I got, that it was great that he didn't just like give us the answer, but also like helped us a little bit in the wrestling of a lot of the questions, which I think is so much what it means to be a Wayfarer. It's not just about having the right answers, but like how do you work through a lot of those questions, which was fun.
No, totally. I think that was my favorite part about it. Just how like relatable Mike was. It wasn't like he was in this like high chair talking down to us. Like he was there with us, telling us how it's difficult to continue walking the walk, but why it's so important. So very validating, very relatable. So shout out to Mike.
He was on a high chair, though.
He was.
We were all on
Technically.
high chairs too.
we equalized it.
Zach, was it hard being the second smartest person on one podcast for the first time?
I've got lots of reps with that. Lots and lots of reps with that. So that was, any lab episode for sure, for sure. We stack it that way. No, it's great. I was comfortable in that. I love that. And what I love is being back here, though. I love that venue. I love doing it with an audience. I love having a guest. All of that is all good. But it also reminded me why I love the table. And you point out the Wayfarer journey has that both and there's something about being back at the table that I love. You guys know that we came in. I just had the opportunity to go walk by the pub where Lewis and Tolkien would have been sitting, the Eagle and Child. And we actually went to, there's one across the street too, and we went and sat down literally in the room where they would have just sat for hours just having conversations like this. And I think that's what stuck out is, can we smash both those together? Because we could have sat there all night asking questions, and to do it in this form where you can be around a table with good friends. And just before the episode we started tonight, you were praying, and it's no small thing to have great friends around a good table asking good questions. So it was awesome.
Yeah, so much fun. Yeah, and we find ourselves still on the journey here for Wayfarer in episode 8.
Mm-hmm.
Taken back 2 episodes ago, we were coming out of the cave, which was crazy to think about that journey of coming out of the cave. And, now we kind of, what was that?
Big step in.
And so we kind of find ourselves out of the cave now, which is a weird place to be. And so, as we're thinking through kind of that, the mantra that we left off with of you are God and I am not, I feel like that you can really come to this kind of uncomfortable place where it's like you've said that, you believe that and don't really know exactly what that means for the rest of your life. As you guys try to remember when you went through that kind of transition, what did that kind of look like for y'all?
It looked like a lot of back and forth searching of, okay, this is going to be my place. Like, oh, these are going to be my friends. Oh, these people are going to lead me towards Jesus. And like, yes, they did, but I think that it's uncomfortable because you're finding new territory, but it can be really lonely at times, because where you think that these people are also walking the walk with you, it's like they are, but it might look different and you have to find your own place. So I would mostly say it was just very confusing in sorts of ways. I'd say I probably went in and out of many friend groups in that short span of time, in and out of lots of clubs. It's a big experimental phase. How about that? Just trying to find my place. The amount of Bible studies I went to before I found the one that I was like, these are my people. Like, I feel comfortable. It was definitely a journey. So that's how it looked for me, at least.
confusing, I would echo that. It just because once you're out of the cave and you're like, okay, I have, like I acknowledge that you're there. Now what? Like, who are you? What does that mean? Like, the Bible is full of these stories and how much of that applies to my life and what's going to change. And it can be disappointing too when you don't necessarily get everything you thought you were going to get now that you're out of the cave. And it takes a lot of time to understand what that actually means now that you're out of the cave. I don't think you ever figure it out, but
not fully. What did it look like to kind of wrestle with that confusion? And this could be for both of you guys, as far as, you know, obviously you have all those questions. It's like, what did that look like? You know, whether it be day to day or week to week, as far as walking that journey.
There's doubt, and there's like wanting to go back for sure, and there's it's easy in church. It's easy on Sunday when you're with the people that got you out of the cave, but then when you start to bring that into the rest of your life, it doesn't fit, and people didn't see that part of you before, and they don't understand it, and it's kind of weird. to be honest. Yeah.
No, I think that's real. The draw of the cave is always there. It's always just so close. I referenced it in an email as like a gravitational pull. That it's like you always kind of feel that longing, and it's about trying to get further away from that.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Katya?
I'd say that I felt like it was very discouraging a lot of the times, because like you found such security in certain things, and like Jonathan was saying, like it's so easy to just be like, okay, I'll just go back to that friend group. Like they invited me to go out last night, like I'll just go out with them next week. Like it's so easy to just go back. But I think that in that I learned what balance was, because it's not that like what you were doing before, at least for me, it was I was doing too much, or I was trusting in these worldly things too much. But like in that phase, I learned the beauty of balancing. And it's like, as a young adult, I think one of the biggest thing was like, I'd go out way too much. I'd hang out with those people way too much. Like it was what I was expected to do as a college student. But then when getting out of the cave, finding my people, finding the nice Bible study, I like found that, okay, I can like do my Christian, and I can also be a Christian while I go out, and I can still be a Christian while I'm with these people who aren't Christians. And it was like finding my security in myself and not finding security in the people I was with. That was like the biggest thing. And I think that's where I'm talking about like balance wise. So that was a huge lesson, although discouraging at times and confusing. Something I think that phase was, like I was mentioning in a couple podcasts ago, it was very formative. You know, just very constructing to my human, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think comfort kind of goes along with what both of you guys are saying, is that it's so uncomfortable that it's so easy to just want to run to things that are comfortable in life, whether it's an old friend group or partying or, you know, even being lethargic. I used to order Uber Eats Five Guys. I did it twice in one night one time, which is not not a proud moment. But it's like you crave comfort, so it's like you go for it. So
it's also delicious. So
it is really good.
Undeniably going to be in heaven on the food buffet. What about you, Riley?
All I can think about is Five Guys now.
Occasion fries.
No, but for me, I feel like we all like we all say, like sometimes we catch ourselves, you know, going back into those situations where they were almost cave-like, or going back to those groups that, you know, weren't necessarily the best thing for us, didn't have the best influence on us, or we would do things that we knew weren't right. And I feel like we still will catch ourselves sometimes doing those things. I feel like they don't ever really disappear. Those temptations, those opportunities for those choices and things to happen always will arise. But I feel like what makes me not want to go back to those places, and makes me want to, you know when, all right, like, we've been out for like an hour, it's probably about time for me to, you know, hit the road and go home and get a good night's sleep, or open a book tonight or something like that. I feel like what makes me want to make that choice more often than want to stay is whatever the feeling that you feel like that's giving you, like whatever sense of like, oh, meaning, or whatever that sense of belonging or fake meaning that is bringing you isn't real. And I feel like eventually you figure that out. That's why we all like don't want to be in the cave anymore, because we know there's so much more to life, and there's so much outside of the cave. There's so much nature and things that we just don't go to anymore. And I feel like that's what makes me, when I'm in those moments and I'm in those, whether it's a relationship or even going out with friends and going out on the weekend and doing something, and it feels satisfying in that moment, but then at the end of the night I'm sitting there and I'm like, nah, I feel so empty, and it's like I don't want to be here anymore. And so I feel like those are the moments where I'm like, all right, I don't want to be in the cave. And that's what reminds me and helps me like stay away from going back into the cave almost.
What did that journey look like from like a timing perspective? Because like I know if I order Five Guys, I'm going to feel bad afterwards. I know that, and I still order Five Guys sometimes. So what did that look like for you? Obviously, Five Guys is a silly example, but like...
No, it's a great example. I can answer it right now. The last time I ate Five Guys, I went for a run after. And it was a bad run, but I felt so much better about myself because I ate a really bad meal for me. But then I ran it all off, and I felt better about myself.
So you're saying we can do bad things, but then do good things to cover up the bad things. That's your testimony here.
You're twisting my words here.
An eye for an eye.
Call Mike. Call Mike.
Oh, Mike, we need you back, buddy.
That's great.
Zach, what about you? Thinking about the not easy transition out of the cave.
Yeah, I think first, just listening to you all, you're in good company, and we're in good company. I think that's the wayfaring that we started out saying we want to recover something that's been lost. And to your point, I don't think we've done a great job as the Christian community in the 20th century, like this modern moment where when you do kind of see through to the longing beyond the material world, there hasn't been a really great posture in the Christian community of walking together through the difficulty. And if you read something like Augustine, where I was just talking about his book Confessions, it's brilliant. I mean, he wrote it in his 40s, and he's looking back, and he has sections like 18 to 30, and he has this section, and then he has like his 20s, his 30s, up to the 40s, and he's just being really honest about that struggle and how he himself was trying to find his way. That's actually a really helpful and honest thing to hear from a guy like St. Augustine, and be like, oh, so at 24, you were still wrestling with like, God, I long for you, but I don't. And I long for you, and I took 3 steps forward, but then I wrestle here, or I trusted you, but then I didn't. So first, like, I think it's not uncommon to feel what you're feeling. I think part of who you all are and who we're hoping to be is to be a Christian community that can be like, okay, that's the journey. That's what it looks like to walk it out. So I think it was just cool to hear you all talking honestly about that, because I think a lot of people feel that like, I got to go hard right or hard left, depending on the day. And it's kind of a dualist thing that emerges, that where you have a public self and a private self, or my Christian self and then my non-Christian self. And maturity is really moving to more of an integral place where you can be like you were saying, I am a Christian. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. Doesn't mean I have all the answers. But my conviction is that I'm following Jesus. And I do that here, and I do that here. I do that with these people, and I do that with these people. I'm the same person. And that I needed help with that, coming out of growing up in the church and then making a strong, conviction, or having a strong conviction to say, I want to live in this particular way. We prune out too much. I did that same thing where we say, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I think perfect moderation's harder than perfect abstinence. And that's a difficult thing to get your mind around. Like it's easier in some ways to cut it all off and try to live apart. But that other space is really it's an incarnational place. And that's where joy comes. So I don't know. Rod Dreher wrote a book called The Benedict Option. Ding. Yeah. The double because Augustine. But Rod Dreher wrote Benedict Option, and he was talking about St. Benedict. And he said in our modern moment that we need liturgies of withdrawal and return. And that idea that and this, Riley, goes to your point, and this is what I've found in my life. we can't fool ourselves and say, oh, I can stand right at the threshold of the cave, kind of dip a foot in it, kind of live like that, and not have it reshape us and start to pull us back into a posture that was before. We can't lie to ourselves. That does happen. So we need, and this is Dreyer's point about the Benedict option, you need these places, these moments, these spaces where you recalibrate and you really do kind of refresh and reset that vision, so that you can enter back into those spaces that you're traveling in an integral way, because it's difficult. It's complicated to do it.
Yeah, I think the journey of it is, it's so like during the kind of the transition period, it can feel like to come out of the cave. Like we always want to be complete.
Yeah.
We want it to be finished. Like we want to graduate from college. We want to get the certificate. We want to get a new job, whatever it could be. Like we want it to be done. And I think so much of it is buying into that journey of like, it's uncomfortable. It's not going to feel perfect. You're not going to be perfectly comparable to anybody else, because it's like everybody's on their own path. In a marathon, everybody's on a different step. And you can constantly want to look at each other's steps, but it's like, that's just not really how it works.
That's such a great picture, just the marathon race, and that even if your pace is way different, you're on the same exact journey, and celebrating that, recognizing that. There's so much there to unpack, but that's a beautiful perspective to have. And that's why we say long, slow, deep, right? Walk on, never alone. All these wayfaring things are to try to recover that, because how awesome, because I want to give up, right? If you say, hey, will you run this marathon with me? And will you keep up with my pace and keep in step with me and do it exactly like I do it and wear the same shoes, I'm out. I just can't keep up with that. But if you invite me to be on that same road and then you celebrate it and go, hey, I'm glad to see you here. There's something winsome about that just goes like, okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's something so mature also in that statement, because I can think about so many times in the past, like anytime, even maybe today, where it's like you'll look at someone and you're like, yeah, sure, they have that, but they're super annoying. like you always want to like put them down for something.
Which one of
I
you
don't
is she
know.
looking
We're
at?
all right here.
No, like I feel like it's such human nature to look at someone who is living and walking such a beautiful life and doing such good, and you want so badly for there to be something wrong with them because you're like, you're so perfect. But I mean, to be able to look at your neighbors and celebrate them and be proud of them and just cheer them on, like as they're walking their journey and as you're walking your journey, I think that's a beautiful state of mind, and that's something I try to practice every single day so that can be habit, because I think in walking in that mindset, you yourself will feel more fulfilled and feel like you've gone farther, because
or even like when like it even falls into like what friendship is. It's like when you're running that marathon and your friend is exhausted and they have to stop and take a breather, or they fall for some reason, it's like, and you're running, you don't run past them, like you like, even though it's a marathon, like if you see your friend fall on the ground, would you just run past them? No, you'd help them up, right? I mean, I hope so. If you're good friends.
I'm trying to PR. I can't wait on anybody.
I'm moving.
Dustin.
Right.
Won't
past.
trust Jared in that scenario, but yeah, like you would pick them up, like, I don't know, it's a friendship.
I think that's what, you see those images in a race of like an insanely accomplished athlete stops running and goes back. And you've seen those pictures where they lift somebody up and give them that push. And how awesome too, to look ahead and to know that like what it cost you to run like that. Like instead of tearing them down or hoping they trip, like the mature recognition of like, I know what it takes to run the pace I'm running. And so to do that, like, kudos, right? Like that takes so much, and you've been through so much. And you think about the people we've had the opportunity to know who are further down the road than we are, and we go, man, how did they get that mature perspective? How do they have that vision of Jesus? A lot of times it comes with suffering, comes with loss, comes with grief. They've traveled more of these valleys than us and back up some of those hills. And so to have a perspective that's like, wow, I see what that takes.
You got it, John.
As I say, that goes into being, getting out of the cave and being humbled, and the difference between being humble and being humbled. First, I think you have to be humble before God and say, okay, like if this is true, then you are God and I am not. And then that translates into with people, because when you serve a God and you are nothing before him, well, that God also made your fellow people, and you're nothing before them either. And that's powerful, but so hard, man. Pride is it just like eats away at everything and just hides its face. And it's like C.S. Lewis says, like pride is a sin that is just straight from the devil, because it doesn't gain anything for yourself. You don't get any. It's like greed, at least you get money, you know, but pride is just to be better than someone else. And it's just it eats into everything. And Zach, you are by far the most humble man I know, like genuinely humble. And I'm like you could, like you said, you cut yourself down to your bone. You embody that. I'm curious, is it always been like that? Is that something that changed in time?
That's a good question.
In the cave, out of the cave,
Right out the womb. Yeah. He was humble.
My mom will be the first caller. She's like, where do I call? How do I do this? Like, do we do that
We're
anymore?
getting a live note from Zach's mother.
From the past, she's calling. Right? No, it's not like that for anybody. It certainly wasn't for me, right? I think to go back that line, there's a difference between being humble and being humbled. And I don't know if I know a person who exhibits that beautiful characteristic of humility that doesn't have a story of humiliation. And that's different. Like humiliation is a thing we want to avoid, but being humbled, like having the chair kicked out from under you and realizing and seeing yourself for like the sin that's in you, the brokenness, the failure, all of that. I've had lots of those. So I think that I have lots of reps at that. I think that there was a particular moment where I came face to face with the pride in me. And I was wrestling, and I was only doing it because I was going to propose to Cammie, and I wanted to, I knew, like you all know Cammie, you know my wife, she's like far superior as a creature. And I was wise enough to know that. And so I had a lot in me still that was very, very dark, very broken, very undone. And I was going to propose. And I literally was sitting on a porch at my friend's house in Los Angeles. And I was sitting there listening to helicopters and sitting outside. And the next day I was going to get on a boat to go propose to Cammie. And I literally was like, I would not want her to marry me. Like, I want to ask her to marry me, but I want her to marry the version of me that I want her to get to marry, but I am not that. And I had to face that, and it was like, oh my gosh, what is, and so it was a process of, the next 48 hours being humbled by God directly, and that's a whole nother story. But I literally had to come face to face with that, and wanting to rise to love. Peter Kreeft says, we don't fall in love, we rise to love. And I think I didn't even have language for that, but I knew that who I wanted to be for her, I couldn't be that with who I was. And there was no way out. And that brought me face to face with God's grace, because there's no way. How do you make it up in 48 hours? How do you become suddenly the guy? And back to confession. One of the remarkable things about God is, like, when you come to him and you confess and you say, I can't fix it, but I know what I don't want. I know what's in me, and that I don't want. And I would need to be set free from that. And I don't want to pursue that anymore. And it's an honest surrender place. God will meet you right there. And that's what happened to me. I talk about it in terms of being leveled and lifted. And it's the strangest thing. When you encounter Jesus, this is what's amazing about Jesus, is you are both brought as low as you can possibly be, because you're standing in the presence of like God, perfect in every way, holiness. And so you are other. He is God, you are not. And you recognize like how sinful you are, and how even your righteous acts are like filthy rags. Like that's a reality, right? But at the same time, he's lifting you up, and you understand that you are a child, and you're perfectly loved, but perfectly not at the center. And there's a harmony to that space. That's what I mean, leveled and lifted, humbled, not just trying to be humbled. And I think that was probably the most acute experience of dealing with God and dealing with my own sin and facing it. And I can tell you that God met me in that place, and there was a dramatic change from that day forward. Even people that know me are like, you are not the same guy. So I was not always, that's a long answer, but I was not always that guy. And it took confession. It took contrition. It took
a bit of divine intervention.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
That was a beautiful testament, just because I feel like you also provided, like, unintentionally, a way for people to kind of learn how to walk out of that too. Because I think when you're out of the cave and you're walking your walk, a lot of times you can fall into things like pride or greed or whatever habit. And if you have like a basic like moral code of like, I want to be a good Christian, I want to be a good person, and there are things that are keeping me from that. You mentioned like I had to stand face to face with the things that were keeping me from being the perfect person for Cammie. So you had like a very objective visual of how I can step towards being the person I want to be for Cammie. And for people who are listening, or even myself, like we can now have like a visual of like what's keeping me from being that person I want to be. Like what prideful things are in the way, what greed do I have? And I mean, somehow eliminating, but I feel like the eliminating part, how did you walk through elimination? Because it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to not be in that friend group anymore. I'm not going to be in that club. I don't even know. But it's another thing to be standing face to face with yourself and looking at your own pride that comes naturally in and out and completely eliminate it. I mean, what kind of practice do you think you went, like, was it devotional, journaling, walking in nature, like things that can keep you humbled in with God? That's really good.
Yeah, I think the only way to answer that is to go back to what you said about having the perfect vision. Like, I'm so grateful for the Christian tradition and Christian faith. Lewis was a Christian humanist for this reason, because his conviction was, we've seen what we were intended to be. We've seen love embodied. And that ideal, while ahead of us always, is there. And when you look at Jesus, you see embodied in human form, love taken on flesh. And so that's what hit me, is I was like, I want Cammie to marry that kind of love. I don't want her, mine is an immature, selfish, self-centered, prideful, all manner of not what she deserves. I want her to marry that kind of love that lifts her up and seeks her highest good. But I had a vision of it. I've seen it, right? And that's what is so helpful when you long for something, is you go, if that was some ethereal thing, then I'm trapped in that's why I say the vision is Jesus. Like, I go, okay, I want to look like that. And that was the first move. I had a place to look to, and I had this huge gap. And the first move is to confess, like, okay, that's not something I can do, right? Thomas the Chemist wrote The Imitation of Christ. And I understand that, but I think Christianity offers something even deeper, because Christianity says, like, if you will say, come and make your home in me, that the life of Christ is actually birthed in you. And so residing within us is the potential for that love of God to mature and to transform our life. So to answer your question, I had a vision of it. And what was ignited in me was not habits and practices that helped me not do something. It was a passion to become something, right?
So
like, I had a vision of what it looked like to love another person. And I was like, I want to look like that. And that became a desperate, like, and it still to this day is my desperate prayer. Like, God, through your Spirit, make me look more like you, mature your love in me. And so there are practices that help me keep in step with that, but the power, the grace, the real transformation, I think for anybody who's experienced it, is you go, that is outside of myself. Like, God, if you desire it, he will do it. And so what happened to me is I saw a vision of that, and I became ignited with a desire for that to be true in my life. And so I, every day to this day, say, but my prayer is literally, make me look more like you.
Wow.
and see that through the course of my life.
That's a beautiful perspective change. Don't eliminate, but have a passion to go forward towards something. And like what you mentioned, like I feel like when we're born to be in relation with each other. Like we're born to, like psychologically, like we were living in caves with tribes, and we really depended on those relationships. And like the fact that you had Cammie, but like in like the singleness of being a girl Christian, like you can almost envision like, how can I be the person I want to be for my future husband, or how can I be the person I want to be for my future children, like, and how can you walk towards that? And I mean, I guess I'm speaking for the side of people who might not have a Cammie yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
There's only one.
There's
so
only one.
Here's what's
Sorry,
cool
guys.
about that is the destiny. I say this, like our destiny is to look just like Jesus. Like we were made by him, for him, made in his image, made to look like his likeness. And that's the invitation is, come on, follow me and I'll make you look like more and more like me over the long course of your life. So whether you're single, whether you're married, whatever, the journey is, will the love of God mature in my life to such a degree that it transforms me? That's the invitation to just be like, yes, right now. That's the wayfaring journey.
Yeah, and that's what like C.S. Lewis talked about, is like we need stronger spells.
Yeah,
It's not enough to not want to do something. You have to want to pursue something else more. Like that's how we change. Like that's how we grow. That's how I think we go through the process of, kind of what you mentioned earlier, like recalibration, that process of being humbled. What does that look like for you guys as far as, thinking through that like transformative period of being uncomfortable, but, slowly being changed? Was that, is it all at once? Is it days and years of going through it?
You can't do it alone, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
When I went through that, stepped out of the cave, I was still in my same environment, and I would just go right back in every single time, living in a college apartment. And then it was just very frustrating. But then I moved in with my sister, and she didn't even know it, but just her being there provided the accountability that I needed, being away from my previous environment and just with family and with people who I know look out for my best interests, not just for a good time, and who want to see my highest good, people that I know love me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that that's right, Ed. I mean, like you can't try and be outside the cave on your own. Like it just doesn't work. Like I think Zach, even you said it, like you can't like just like tiptoe back, dip your foot back in the cave every week, like, and like the only way, like you can't do that on your own. You need to be growing in your relationship with God, like having that relationship and that accountability with him, but as well as like being surrounded by people, because the people you surround yourself with, like you're gonna look and do some way or shape or form of what they do and what they look like almost. And so if you're just if you step out the cave but you're still surrounding yourself with the people that are in the cave, it's like is much changing. You need to also have, like, I'm not saying you can't surround yourself with those people anymore, but you need to have a group of people that you can surround yourself with, that you can trust and know have your best interests and are like-minded and don't want to be in the cave anymore. So
I think for me, in the process of being humbled, it was the conscious decision to take the lessons and move in the direction of truth and not move in the direction of my own like selfishness. Like what I was mentioning, like when you look side to side and see people going faster than you are and you just got knocked to the ground, and it's the conscious decision to get back up and not sit on the ground and be like, oh my gosh, my life sucks. It's that conscious decision that I learned through that. And even the idea that what Riley was kind of mentioning was, when it comes to looking back and seeing where you had been, there was a very peaceful realization I had with, I didn't necessarily leave the people behind, but we both served each other's fulfillment in the time we needed each other. And whether it was good or bad, we learned so many lessons together. And it's not a parting of, bye, I'm too good for you now. It was more of a, we've we've fulfilled each other to the moment that we needed each other, and now we can continue living our life, and there's no ill will. It was very much a maturing moment for me. Again, the conscious decision to walk in the direction of goodness and truth, and not sitting back in negative darkness.
Mm-hmm.
That was for me, at least.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a combination of all those things. Like, community is the only way that I've been able to truly grow. And I think, like, being, like, honest and, like, raw in the moments, because you're going to be uncomfortable. Like, it's an uncomfortable process of changing, and literally it's counterculture of what you're doing. And so the moments where I've just been just brutally honest about where I was at, where my heart was at, is times where I felt like it was the most life-changing, especially because, you know, God meets you there. And then you get to also tangibly feel others, like, love you, like, in places that you think you're unlovable. And, like, it's impossible for people to meet you there. And when they do, it's such a beautiful picture of God's love in those moments, which I think is everything. And it's humbling. It's humbling when you, like, tell people about your deepest, darkest secrets, and then they look at you and go, yeah, I love you. And you're like, what? Like, I thought you were going to hate me. Like, this doesn't make any sense, you know? But it's like, it's never that. And it's like, we so often want to believe, especially when you feel vulnerable, that you need to conceal and hide. And it's like, the more you open up and let people in, it's like, I feel like you get met there by so much, whether it's community and God. Those are some of the most beautiful moments I think about.
Yeah. I think the cool thing about the community that you're describing too is when you have a shared aim, like we talk about wayfaring is walking in the direction of our hope, having a stronger spell touch us, and then being with people who are also in that pursuit. There's something really beautiful, right? Because then we're aiming at something that's outside of ourselves. If I'm just in a tribe that's like, hey, we're the Be True to Yourself tribe, that's cool, and it'll be fun for a while to be like, oh, Riley, what's that? Good on you, you do you. But you're not bound together. Yeah. It's a totally different thing if we're like, let's climb Everest. We're all aiming at the same thing, and it's a crucible, and it's costing me, and it's costing you, and your experience is different than my experience, but we're all aiming in the same way. And I think that's what happened when Jesus was like, come follow me. This radically diverse, eclectic mix of people was like, man, what is the commonality in their life? And I think they were looking around like, is this happening to you? Because it's happening to me, right? John's looking at Matthew, Matthew's looking at Mark, and then people are just like, this aim is transforming my life. And I know I'm feeling that. Are you feeling that? And we can reference off of something outside of ourselves. And so we share something. I think that's Jesus' like prayer, like be one. And your aim is the same. So there's something beautiful when you are in a tribe that has had that stronger spell touch them, is aimed at something outside of themselves that's bigger, that's pulling everyone in the same direction. And then the secret sauce is the power at work within you is the same power that's at work within me, that's the same power that raised Christ from the dead. And so even if I grow tired, even if I fall over, it's the grace at every start, to quote Mumford. But like, that's that thing that rises up, is like, oh no, you may not think it's possible for you to transform like that, for love to mature your life like that. There may be moments where you're like, that it just seems too much. And somebody comes along inside and says it's impossible for any of us. But the same power that transforms life from death is at work in you and me and you. And we're all aiming at that. So before us and behind us and within us is this immeasurably great power working together for this thing. That's what I think. That's what is other. And I'll just come out and say it, like, it's different than what you find in a workout community, in a brunch community, in a tennis community. All good, right? But there is a fire in the soul when you meet a group of friends who are aiming at that thing beyond yourself. Yeah. And there's nothing like it. Once you've experienced a community like that, there's something, because it's what we're made for. And it's lifelong, right? We'll be sitting around at 84 years old going, did you feel that transformation take place? Did you see that bit of pride get pressed out of you? Isn't that? And you're like, yeah, that happened to me too.
The idea of walking in stillness and in rest was so hard for me to understand once getting out of the cave and continuously walking. Like, I would say up until recently was it that I was actually comfortable with just being with myself and understanding that that doesn't mean just like sitting in a room and like staring at a wall. Like, it's what Zach was throwing out was finding relationships where you guys can like sit and be still, and even with yourself, maybe outside. But the conversations feel like you guys could just be talking for a million hours, and you continuously just go deeper and deeper and continuously are fulfilled and feel, it's like, when when it feels good, when you're just like, okay, this conversation is not going much farther. Like, we just continuously are talking about tennis, which is so fun. But like, there's much more to life than just, no shade to tennis players. I love tennis.
Tennis is coming back too. Pickleball.
Pickleball.
I'm out on tennis.
We need to play pickleball soon. But anyway, I'm just saying there's a lesson in understanding that in stillness and in rest, there's just this depth. And I'm going to quote Zach. One of my favorite quotes I've heard recently. It was, every time I watch the sunset, I relearn how it plunges into the sea. And it's such a, like, oh my gosh, the fact you thought of that, that's beautiful, because it's so true. Like, imagine every time you watch a sunset or you watch a bird just flying away, or there's something so mesmerizing about the stillness of the untouched world, something that we haven't created, something that we aren't scrolling for hours. Think about, you can sit outside for hours and never get tired of looking at the sky, or never get tired of looking at animals or just the trees, how that like the wind goes through them. But then I can be scrolling on TikTok for like 3 hours and I physically feel sick. Like, I feel overwhelmed by consumerism. I feel just disgusting with the amount of information I just ingested about how to take rust off of my table, like the most randomest things. But like, you can just spend hours outside. I'm just giving examples for visual context, but like, I just think about that. It's like there's this never ending fulfillment when you find the rest and the stillness.
And the thing that's such an underrated part of the journey, especially, it's definitely counterculture in like the Western culture. I think trying to like rest well, like we don't know how to rest well. Like, we think being on TikTok, being on Twitter, playing video games, like, is resting and like taking a load off. And I think some people, you can experience like a level of rest in those things, like temporarily. Like, I don't think they're inherently bad. Like, I think Twitter can be good sometimes, but I think ultimately it's like there's different ways to find that rest. And I've had to realize about myself, I used to love video games, but playing video games for 4 hours doesn't give me rest like it used to. Like, when I was a kid, I felt like it was more fun, more energizing. So it's interesting how rest can change, like, in our lifetimes.
Didn't we interview somebody on Lab who had a book called Rethinking Rest?
Yeah, we did. I mean, the Rethinking Rest is the book. It's about Sabbath. But even today, we had a conversation with Margarita Mooney Clayton, and she wrote a book called The Wounds of Beauty. Phenomenal book, beautiful book. And in that, she interviewed someone else who was reflecting on a culture of a culture that worships nothingness, experiences boredom. And she said boredom is the hallmark. And she was quoting someone else, but she said boredom's the hallmark of a culture that worships nothing. And I was like, oh my goodness. And this goes right back to sloth. It goes right back to this noonday devil that steals you away from becoming who you were made to be. And it sucks you into boredom. And you find yourself not in a place of wonder, not in a place of rest, which is leisure and like opening up to wonder and being small and reflecting on the idea that who holds the sun and dips it in its proper time in and back up again. Like, we've lost that capacity for imagination and that perspective, and we've traded it for this very, very, very other experience that leads to that boredom and that endless scroll. And so it's a discipline to take yourself back out and say, that's why we say it's a creature creator recalibration. Like, wait a second, I was made, and this whole thing is held together. It's the most enchanting reality to think that I can stand at the edge of that water, and it will not go beyond where it was created to go. It just will not. There's a boundary there, and at such time that the sun plunges, the moon is moving. And when you see that animation, that's why the music of the spheres, you get this sense that, no, this thing is alive, and I'm a part of that story. Then all of a sudden, then, you know, scraping rust on the no offense to rust on the table or tennis, but it pales in comparison to the wonder, and you want to open yourself back up, which is leisure, which is very different than just endless Netflixing, right? Mm-hmm. That's not, and that's a modern definition of leisure is I do nothing. And a better, more helpful definition for leisure is I'm learning, I'm opening myself up in wonder to receive something.
It's muscle memory too, man. Whenever I boredom for sure, that's when I get into trouble. And I'll just I'll take my phone out and like open Instagram without even doing it. It's subconscious, and you go into it. So it's so hard to break that cycle. But I found if I take my free time and do things like cooking, like try making a new meal, chop vegetables, like I feel so much more rested than TikTok.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's embodied. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the thing that's so difficult about our moment is we've automated everything, you know, but to put your hands in warm water and wash dishes and to scrape plates from food that you've made and to cut those vegetables and to let them roast or whatever it is, like all of that, we actually have to recover a slower way of being. And that's actually a discipline. It's a beautiful discipline to recover, but we feel more human. Mm-hmm. It's great.
Yeah. Have you seen frozen vegetables though? You don't have to chop them anymore. You can just buy them chopped. You can buy them chopped.
I love it. Even when I do that, I like to chop them up.
Really?
I do.
He likes to chop vegetables.
Just Cam comes home, you've defrosted the vegetables.
Defrosted, slicing thinly.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, great conversations. You know, I think the process of coming out of the cave is a lot of change, and I think can be scary. It was kind of fun to kind of dive into all of that. Kind of where we're going from here, I think, is really thinking about what's next after the recalibration, the rest, and you know, the getting to, you know, that relationship with God, like the vision up with Him of, you know, he obviously has a love for us, and it's, you know, that reciprocal love that we start to grow in us of, I love you back. The scary words.
Can we pin a word to talk about that I'm just saying this so we remember it, but adoration. We just listened to this incredible artist, Victory Boyd, and she has the song Glory to God, but you hear her singing and you go, what is that? I say it like this, that our first position as creatures outside the cave is worship, and trying to relearn what does that mean to be a creature of adoration. I think if we can touch that, that's a good conversation.
Yeah, I think we'll get into that next.
Let's go.
Beautiful.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Feel free to like and subscribe and do all those things. It'll be on all the socials. And comment. Let us know what you guys think about this conversation. If you guys want us to dive into something else at the beginning of the next episode, we'd love to get chatting about it. So thanks so much. See y'all next time.
Thanks, guys.
Never alone.
Walk on.
Walk on.
Walk on.
Walk on.